let's see here. Okay, so we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but oftentimes this is because there are a lot of underwriting sort of attachment needs that are not being met. So if the relationship is feeling very unsafe to a partner, then he or she is going to be very distressed, and he or she is going to be feeling like everything is negative, even though it may not be. Okay, so the idea here is that we start to sort of help them feel safer. Well, I don't even know how Gottman would do this. I mean, I know how.
Yeah, I think it's first like they identify that negative.
Right, and have to define it.
Negative override as a negative override. It's like
making it explicit, I guess.
Yeah, it's like you're chewing too loud.
Right.
You know, okay, well, you've been chewing the same way for a long time. It's starting to notice the times when things that are neutral, normally neutral, are no longer neutral, and you realize this is about me and it's not about you.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of a sudden you're starting to pick up on things that are on your radar screen that would normally be there. You know, and then there's a theme to it too. It's not just one thing you're picking up on. You're picking up on a lot of things. Right? You guys been in that state where you have a negative override, and then the person cannot do anything right, and then you start saying things about it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, what the heck? Like, you are all over me today. And you're like, well, that's because you're so irritating today. Today is a special day. You woke up and decided to be more irritated than any other day. Normally you're less irritated, but today it's you. And then it's the recognition that, okay, something's going on inside of me. What's happening inside of me? What is the unmet need in the relationship that's driving me to this irritable state? It's not always something in the relationship. It could be other things that go on. It could put you in a state of negative sentiment override, where you're just, you know, everything you're viewing, you got this lens on today. You guys relate to this, right? And then it's just like, no one can do anything
PMS,
right.
maybe, right?
You know, right? No one can do anything right. Yes. So, anyways, we're all victims of that. Male or female.
It's male PMS. It's a thing.
Male PMS.
Totally.
Okay. All right, so the hope here, once again, if you're trying to like develop a culture of appreciation in your marriage, what you're shooting for is to have a couple be in positive sentiment override, which is basically just when a couple recognizes that despite what may be going on in the ebbs and flows of the daily, you know, interactions in the relationship, you have this sense that your spouse has got your back, that they're on your team, that they care about you. And so you're able to give them the benefit of the doubt, even if something doesn't go well or if something isn't handled very well, which is going to come up, right? That's just that's the nature of relationship, right? So when you're in positive sentiment override, you trust that your partner is looking after you, and even then you view neutral events as neutral, or you can even notice, even when something happens, you can kind of like do the reframe. Like, this wasn't handled very well, but I can flip it to where I can recognize that maybe he didn't handle that very well, but I think he was trying, kind of thing. So it's a way to sort of, again, it's sort of like it's a global way of feeling about your partner, that you recognize, and even in the moments that things aren't going well, that they're trying their hardest and they're doing their best, and that they care about you. So this is the product right here, I would say, of secure attachment, right? Because, you know, I keep kind of, when I'm working with my couples, you know, I make mention of the fact that what we're after really isn't that you're never going to argue again. That's not really realistic. And if you've got two people with two personalities, and, you know, there is going to be ongoing, you know, conflict, or there's going to be you've got two human beings involved. But the idea here is this can be worked through, and you recognize at the end of the day that you do love and care about one another, and that you're going to get through it, and it's going to be okay. And that's positive sentiment override.
I think sometimes too, like it's not always what's going on in the relationship. Sometimes you transfer, you project onto the partner, something's going on in the other part of your life. Like, I remember the other day I drove home, and I know I was not feeling good about a particular person in my life and interaction. So I was just already in this like irritable state, and I'm pulling him into my garage, and my wife has parked her car practically in the middle of the garage, right? And I have told her so many times, I cannot. And so I park my car, and I'm like squeezing through my door to get out, and I'm like locked and loaded, right? I mean, I'm already so like, and so like I'm crawling out, I'm trying not to scratch her car, and I'm just imagining her in the house just like feeling so great about her day, you know, and just enjoying herself, and pulling in this garage, and I'm thinking about me being pulled in the garage, and then I had to get back in my Jeep and close the door and say, because I had to go out the other door. To actually crawl out the other door to get out of the car. And I just remember saying to myself, this is not her. She did not pull this garage intentionally to take me off. Right? I'm upset about this other thing. I could easily go in this house and just go, would you come here for a minute? Would you look at your car?
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? And instead I walked in and I got her keys and I backed her car out and I put it in its spot. And then I walked in and I talked with her about what was upsetting me that wasn't her. And at the very end of the conversation I said, hey, you know, when you parked the car in the garage, it was over a little bit too far and I had to crawl out the other side. Can you try and remember to kind of scoot it over a little bit? And she's like, oh, sure, right? But it could have come in and been like, all about like, what in the heck are you doing? And used in contempt. Like, are you the worst driver in the world and you can't even find the left side of the garage? There's an example of that, right? So, I don't believe she was doing anything relationally. Sometimes it's driven by that, but I think it's more about something else that was going inside of me. And you know, if I would have come and done that, I could have really, because we could have started going, right? And that could have spread into an hour, and then 2 hours, and then that could have spread into 2 days. You know, it's just noticing that this is not about you. This is about me. That's so helpful. If you can pause and say, this is about me.
That's good. Right?
Because on the way home, I knew this was about me because everyone couldn't drive fast enough. Right? I was very aware of everyone's poor driving and how superior my driving was to everyone else's. Right? Like literally, I went around this guy and he's like, to me, I'm like, you put your finger up one more time.
I'm gonna put it down.
I got a different finger for you, pal. So I knew it was me.
That's good. That's good. I was going to say one thing that I think that I was just thinking about in relation to keeping things in positive sentiment override that I was just thinking about in my marriage is when I am stressed out and my husband can tell because I get a little bit quiet, he'll frequently say, what can I do to help you? Like, what do you need me to do? And that's really, really good. Like, that's a really good way. My response is often, I mean, I actually am pretty good now at saying this is what I need, and it actually does calm me down. And then he can go do that, and then generally, because I think the idea there is that he's aware that I need something, and either we stop and talk, but oftentimes we've got 4 kids, and there's a lot going on, and if he can just help me really quickly, it calms me down, and it keeps us in this place where we can then sort of reconnect, and I'm okay. So that's what I was thinking about as far as keeping things positive and having that, the culture of appreciation and positivity. All right, so let's see, did I skip one? Yeah, okay. So the next one, if you go up to the 5th level of the house, I feel like I skipped more. Okay, so regulating conflict. Oh, and I did have a couple things I wanted to say about this. So this other additional thing that I was reading over the weekend talks about, there are 2, and this also came up in the chapter, I believe, is it talks about when they go back, they recognize if they look at a couple and then they wait 7 years, frequently they're actually arguing about the very same thing, and that a lot of what people argue about are what they call irresolvable conflicts, and the idea there is to recognize that what we're looking at is how to nurture and care for one another in the face of the fact that there may be some things that aren't going to necessarily be like resolved, and that's okay, and that marriages can be very content and vibrant and happy in the face of things that you may not like fix that argument per se, that you can be very respectful. So the idea here is in managing conflict, you want to look at, first of all, it talks about managing the 4 horsemen, and he is very explicit about just teaching. He talks about just teaching your couples what those are and helping them recognize what they're doing so that they're very, very aware. A lot of this is just really, the more I think about it, it's just more awareness, right? It's just helping them. It's very cognitive, or it's psychoeducational. This is what you're doing. This is what it looks like, so they can name it, which means they can recognize it when it's happening. So the first thing he says is you teach them the 4 horsemen, and then you help them recognize it when it's in the room, right? Yeah.
So it's, in a way, it's making a person take responsibility for their
sort of taking ownership of what's going on.
But like, how well does that really work in session when somebody's dysregulated?
Yeah. Well, they say anger management classes are really good until you get angry, right? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say it's tricky, right? Because when they're activated, it's hard to teach them stuff, right? So it's tough to. It's almost like I had one that my first couple, the really narcissistic guy. I even had to like teach some ground rules before he was activated, and kind of let him know. Like for example, when contempt came into the room and he started demeaning her, I would kind of like say this is what it is, but obviously I didn't like fix them, so I don't think it really did that. So yeah, it's tricky. I think these are good skills to have, and if they're higher functioning couples and they're enriching their marriage or they're premarital and they're not in a ton of distress and there's not a lot of trauma and there's not a lot of attachment, like deep-seated attachment stuff, I think this is really good stuff.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. We thought this would be useful stuff if like if you were doing a seminar,
Yeah.
you're teaching a Sunday school class of couples. Like this is useful stuff. This stuff is in books, self-help books. It's all in that same sort of venue.
Very much.
We did this at my site as a marriage enrichment on
Yeah.
Wednesday night for couples.
Mhm.
And we had a couple in crisis, and the main counselor did go to them and say, I'll offer you, he offered them counseling for a discounted price because he said, this isn't for you. This isn't going to help at this point.
It's too big.
But it was too late, yeah. But it was great for, we had a lot of couples that were transitioning into being empty nesters. And so kind of that transition of now, where do we go with this relationship? It was neat to have them break off into all the little questions and stuff, and kind of gave them a refocus. So
Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's got its place, for
Right.
sure.
Right.
Highly distressed couples that are coming in and paying a lot of money to because they're going to divorce, or, I mean, yeah, I don't think it's useful and helpful, but if somebody's in a lot of pain and they're really, really in their limbic brain, the capacity of the brain to work, it's like it's from bottom to top, and so if you're in your limbic brain, your prefrontal cortex it's not even really online, like we've talked about that, right? And so by definition, this is cortex stuff, because you're teaching them stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that like clients, even distressed clients, will come in wanting this kind of stuff.
Oh, it makes sense, kind of,
They
but
want
they don't
control.
recognize.
They want to get control
Right.
really quick of the problem, and so they'll almost like put out like they'll put out therapeutic bids of like fix me, give me these things that I've gotten out of these books. Well, they're there because the books didn't work, and you just want to give them more of the same, and so they really do want some of these anecdotal things. It's not about control; it's about relinquishing control. And so relinquishing control and relinquishing your need and dependency on someone else as a way of regulating yourself, not controlling yourself out of it. Does that make sense? And so it's counterintuitive. What actually needs to happen is to gather something and go and do it. And even in times when I've shared some of this information, most couples will do it for a week, 2 maybe. They'll drop off. If they're really in distress, it'll drop off and they'll stop doing it because it's not working. But then they'll stop coming because what you told them they're not doing, and so they don't want to come and embarrass themselves by saying. And then they think, well, it's our problem if we were more committed, more disciplined, or they use it against each other. Remember what Dr. Fry told us to do? You're not doing soft starts, and so it's like right. It can get it really messy unless they really at a level where they can go and use it. And then even if you do it educational, most couples are going to walk away and remember one thing. They're not going to do all these. They're going to, so one of these things is going to resonate with them, and they're going to go, oh gosh, yeah, I'm so contemptuous. I got to stop doing that. Or, I could be more curious in my relationship, or I don't ever do soft starts. I got to do a soft start. And so even in that, this is so much information that it'd be very difficult for any couple to go and integrate all of this, nor would they necessarily need to integrate all of this in order to be a successful marriage, right? And so I think you have to treat it according to the level of distress and the level of motivation and the fit for the couple and where they're Sure.
Yeah. All right. So he talks about so the 4 horsemen teaching them kind of what to do instead. And then the other thing that he talks about is looking at whatever the conflict is. And this is nice because we've talked about this quite a bit. He goes into a little bit of sort of looking at the origin of the conflict and going deeper into what the meaning of the conflict that oftentimes predates the relationship itself. And so they do a little bit of family of origin stuff. so that the couples sort of have a broader understanding of the fact that whatever they're experiencing is heightened and compounded because